Hello there, and welcome back to War Thunder, to the full tank review on the Centurion Mk.5/1. Now, before I talk further about the tank and how to get it, what it can do, and compare it to its other nations' equivalents in terms of battle rating, and also show you cherry-picked gameplay, I wanna explain to you the concept of my tank reviews and also where to get this tank. First of all, if I do a tank review, as I said, then I'll have an in-depth look in various different stages. Many of the aspects you are already aware of, especially if you're an experienced player, but there are always new players, there are always new visitors to the channels that are not aware of the previously done videos. So to give everybody kind of a same level of entry to then go into the details and the specialities about the tank, that takes just a few more minutes extra, even though certain parts might be obvious. The next thing is, where can you get this tank? Well, in the ongoing Battle Pass Season 2, this tank is a rank 75 reward, and you have to purchase the Battle Pass for 2000 or 2500 golden needles, as in this case I did. And at level 79 you get the Ancient Camouflage as also a coupon. And the question is, should you get this tank to sell it then on the marketplace, or is it actually more than a pretty hangar decoration? Now, one thing first is that this sits at rank 5, and therefore you can research the plenty of rank 6 tanks without penalty. And if you then still feel like British, you can then purchase either other premiums or put talismans on it or grind manually through it. The charm of the Centurion Mk.5/1 is that it is a well-established gun system already, beginning with the Charioteer, but really kicking off with the FE4-202, and obviously at the battle rating of 7.3, a rank lower, we have the Centurion Mk3, the Carnarvon, the STRV-81 RB52, that's the old premium, and I think still available premium, the Centurion Action 10. It is very similar to those tanks in many aspects, but most importantly, it also has this fantastic 20-pounder, which has the combination of high rate of fire, high penetration APDS round, and also a stabilizer. There are trade-offs, of course. For example, the mobility isn't really the greatest, and this then will be obvious in the statistical comparison later on. Those statistics that you will see in just a moment are in-game statistics taken for Ace crew qualifications to have an equal comparison level. Without further ado, let's hop right into it, shall we? As usual, I want to begin with the armor, and I want to have a look at the lower glacis first, because it's 76.2 millimeters or 3 inch at, depending on where you look, around 50 to 55 degrees angle of impact straight ahead. That's the same for the upper glacis, but on top of this we have another 50.8 millimeters. So together then with the structural steel of chassis, that is in theory coming close to a Tiger II upper hull, but it's not just quite as good, and also there is no transmission in the front behind this. And even at around this battle rating, the Tiger II hull as a comparison isn't really holding up to the APDS, APFSDS, Heat FS or high pen solid AP round treatment that you receive on a regular basis. Versus SPA though, it's okay. The side of the hull is equipped with a lot of structural steel of chassis, and then behind this 50.8 millimeter. And that is not as weak as, let's say, a Leopard 1 side armor, and when slightly angled it keeps you safe from most SPA. But from the side, it's just big and flat, easy to pen. The rear is 38 millimeters. Then the engine deck is somewhere between 5, 14, and 8 millimeters of protection. Very easy to damage this tank with an air attack. And the deck on the crew compartment is 29 millimeters. That's a bit better, but even though a big HE splash on the turret face can easily overcome this, KV2 memes, etc. Then we come to the turret itself. Now the turret front, or the turret, is 89 millimeters of cast homogeneous armor. Again, not too bad versus low pen SPA, but versus the high pen SPA it gets tricky, especially here in the turret ring. I come to this in just a moment. Then the turret face itself is cast homogeneous armor of 6" or 152 millimeters, and it has some very fancy angling going on. The gun mantlet itself ranges from 6" down to 4 inches of armor, so 152 to 100 millimeters, and then it is a bit rounded. And together with the overlaps of the gun mantlet and the gun mantlet holding, this is a tricky area to shoot. Especially meme-worthy is here the machine gun port of 200 millimeters that has various different angles and can get up to ridiculous armor values. Then this forehead here is 50.8 millimeters, and in a little bit of unangling and it gets penned easily and overmatched. And then also this cupola has 6 inches of armor. So this tank, sometimes it can pull off some fancy bounces, but more than often it just gets regularly penned. So from this aspect, it's an okayish tank, armor-wise. Internally, we have 4 crew members, of which 3 are in line on the left-hand side. On the right-hand side, you see one big problem of the survivability, and this is this frontal ammo rack. So overall, you have 62 rounds of ammunition, and the ready rack are those 6 shells. Together with the one in the breech, you have 7 for the high rate of fire, and every shell that you take more gets first filled up apparently in this ready rack here, the frontal one, and not the bottom one. But then also not completely, it's a bit weird. And so, yeah, because those shells are standing upright here, and they are right at with their tips on the turret ring, you kind of see the problem of the initial only 50 millimeters protection around here. Was it 50? No, 89, sorry. So that is one of those weak spots. Furthermore, the power pack, engine and transmission are in the back of the tank, as usual. One last thing worth mentioning, here those machine gun cartridges, and also here the cherry cans, they are visually modeled, but there are no hitboxes, there are no external ammo racks. One last thing worth mentioning is the machine guns. You have overall 3, and 2 of them are light machine guns. And there you can see 2 of the barrels here at the front, and that one is actually a coaxial heavy machine gun, which is really nice. And even if you lose your commander, you don't lose the heavy machine gun. That is one thing, because not every British tank does have such a feature. So that was now the look at the tank. Let's have a look at the statistics, shall we? Now let's start with the comparison. Let's begin with mobility. And the Centurion Mk.5 in this comparison doesn't have the weakest engine, but is also not the lightest of tanks, giving it a horsepower to ton ratio of 12.5, which is, versus the other 7.3 medium tanks throughout the nations, by quite a bit the worst. Yes, it's clear that such a tank doesn't reach the level of the Leopard 1, and obviously other tanks such as the Mk.5 and the M47 are more powerful, but the difference isn't really so much notable in straight line, up until the point that you reach the limited top speed of 35, which is on large maps really painful. And while this is one of the best reverse gears that you get for the British up until this point, -12, also in this comparison, isn't really that amazing. The problem with this tank lies with its neutral steering. It has it, but it doesn't really have the engine power to really perform on a ridge line that has roughly 9 to 10 degrees of inclination. It just is a bit sluggish when turning, even more so than other tanks that, for example, you can explain it with the friction from rubber pads or anything like this. This tank is slow. At this battle rating, where there are so many light tanks curving around with autoloaders, with recoilless rifles, etc., this is really painful. You have the advantage of the stabilizer, but the mobility isn't good. let's make no mistake, it isn't good. It is the worst. There are many heavy tanks at around this battle rating that easily outperform it, not just in top speed, but also acceleration and overall handling. And you feel it with this tank. And remember, the armor on this tank makes you safe from some SPA, and that's about it. Finally, let's talk about the gun handling of this tank. And the Centurion Mk.5/1 has the 83.4mm 20-pounder OQF Mark I. It is the same gun as the STRV-81's Khan STRV-81 gun, but here it has just a different name, the original name. And then there is one thing. If it is the 83.4mm gun as stated on the modifications tab, or as it is the 84mm as stated on the stat card, that is irrelevant. It's still the lowest caliber, and that is made up by some fantastic statistics in comparison. First of all, we have 62 shells of ammunition overall. That is more than enough. Even half of this is more than enough for most battles. And the reload with 6.3 seconds, aside from the Mk.5 with its 4-second autoloader, is the best in class and almost half a second faster than the 6.7 golden standard of the 105L7 derivatives that you'll find then to appear on many tanks throughout this battle rating, especially in up tiers. And that is the reload that you have for the 6 rounds in the ready rack plus the 1 in the breach, so 7 rounds. That is mostly more enough for any given one-on-one engagement. So the turret rotation speed is one of those features where the tank then feels a bit awkward. While it is not the worst, that goes to the T-54 1949 with its 10 degrees per second, which is awful. The 20 degrees is quite a bit slower than the 30 degrees, which feels really great on the MX-50. The M47 and even the Leopard 1s with its 24 has just this advantage. It is made up by having a 2-plane stabilizer, a feature no other tank has in this comparison, and that gives you, especially in knife fights, close quarters engagements, or when an enemy appears at close to medium range when you're on the move in the first place, then this is really helpful and can make the difference, and often does make the difference. You also have then minus 10 degrees and plus 20 degrees of gun depression and gun elevation. One of those weird features of this tank is that it has the stabilizer that gives you the feeling of superiority in engagements, but when you are going, for example, bomb craters or any sort of obstacles that makes your tank jump a bit sudden, then the 4.0 degrees of normal gun elevation speed kicks in when your gun reticle is outside of the range of the stabilizer, and then it feels really awkward to have your gun pointing to the sky and an enemy appears around the corner, and then it feels like ages till you depress the gun. When the tank has to be shot on plane level right in front of you and you are ending up with the full 20 degrees of gun elevation, it takes still 5 seconds to depress the gun in its entirety, where then an advantage can result in a disadvantage. Another feature is the NVD, the night vision device. This tank has it like the M47 and the Leopard 1, however, it is not thermal imaging. Thermal imaging makes the difference in combat when you want to spot enemies through bushes, fences, in hazy weather conditions, and especially at night, but also in bright daylight when the sun is directly staring in your face and you see absolutely nothing. Then thermal imaging makes the difference. This tank does not have thermal imaging. It's a night vision device, so you're looking at a green screen. Thankfully, night battles are not that common, so while this tank has it, it's not really that useful, but it is worth mentioning at least once. Now let's talk about the various different ammunition types that you have available. The first one is the Shot Mark I APCBC round. 232mm of penetration and 1000 meters per second muzzle velocity gives it more the penetration characteristics that is comparable to the German Long 88, the L71 88mm. But this is definitely not the tank shell that you want to use. It is usable, has a bit more spalling probably than the other shell type, but the characteristics in muzzle velocity, penetration, and also interacting with sloped armor are not as preferable as the other AP round, to which I will come in just a moment. The second shell type is the Shell Mk.1 high explosive round. With 600 meters per second muzzle velocity, it's really slow, but you can in theory lob it over ridgelines. And 15 millimeters of penetration are also not that amazing. Maybe a few versus the occasional derp potato truck, but for that you also have a coaxial heavy machine gun that further reduces the value of this shell. But you have it. Then we have the 20-pounder Shell SS Mk.1 smoke shell, and that is your only smoke source that you have, because you have no smoke launchers externally and no engine exhaust system. So this is your only source of cover, and yeah, thanks to your high rate of fire, maybe use some of them to smoke up enemy sniping positions, to smoke up allies, to smoke up yourself. However, the muzzle velocity is disastrously slow with 250 meters per second. That is worse than the most derp shells of lower tier tanks. So this is really weird to aim. Finally, let's talk about the Shot Mk.3, and there is quite a bit to talk about. First of all, that is the APDS round that you should and will use exclusively on this tank, with very rare exceptions such as the smoke shell. It has a fantastic muzzle velocity of 1400 meters per second and can penetrate up to 285 millimeters of armor, and at 60 degrees angles of attack it's still 109 millimeters, and at 2000 meters you're just under 200 millimeters versus flat armor, and versus 60 degrees of angles of attack versus an armor plate at 2 kilometers you still punch through 76 millimeters of armor. That is really good. In the comparison, it doesn't really look all that good. It is the worst in class, but first of all, by not that much. And a critical difference is that the M47's APCR is better by almost 40 millimeters, but it's APCR, so it's really bad when it comes to dealing with angled armor, where the APDS is much better. You're still 18 millimeters short of the likes of the T-54 1949 and the Leopard 1, but those are larger caliber guns, and you have the two advantages of having higher rate of fire and a stabilizer, and all the tanks that have better guns than you have equal, or in most cases weaker armor, where the APDS round just is good enough to deal with them. And that's the critical part, because M47s and very often Leopard 1s get spammed out. They use nothing but heat defense that deal with your armor like it's not there, but they also do this with heavy tanks, and so tanks that have critical armor values where you have to aim for weak spots get to appear less and less because of the Leopard 1s and other tanks with similar performance or even more penetration. Think about the 6.7 light tanks with their recoilless rifles, their autoloaders, and their penetration up to, what is it, 433 millimeter, 320 millimeter being regularly equipped on light tanks as low as 6.7. So you are perfect for dealing with the tanks because of this APDS round with the high rate of fire and the stabilizer that make the other tanks obsolete that you might struggle against, which is just a weird way of balancing things in War Thunder. And I think that this is where you then have to put things into perspective. So it is just this round and the stabilizer and the high rate of fire, and that your armor is good enough to deal with SPA in most cases. You don't have a hash round like later 105s, which would be a little bit of a different flavor, but it's not mandatory. In most situations you have to use the shell, and you will use the shell, and it does the job. Yes, it has a bit less spalling than the AP round, but that is neglectable, because switching between the 2 rounds you need to carry more ammunition, and obviously then if you engage the wrong target and the AP round bounces, whereas the APDS would have penetrated, that then very often is the last mistake that you made in that battle. Other than this, this is a fantastic tank. I like to play it. Yes, it's slow. Yes, it's not really cool in close quarters and environments, because of the slow turret rotation speed and your lack of turning ability because of the weak engine. But on long range maps, working ridge lines, it's just fantastic, and this is what you were enjoying the last 15 minutes or so. And that has been the review on the Centurion Mk.5/1. Is it worth it? Yes, it is. And since it will be a collector's item in the long future, I guess like in a year or so, it will be very high in price on the marketplace. So getting this battle pass just for this tank alone is worth it. And then you get a lot of goodies like Civil Lines, RP and SL boosters, wages, orders, and obviously many other things, and even other premium vehicles that are also not that bad. So I hope this review can help you in answering the question if this tank is worth it or not. It obviously depends where you stand. If you want to have like a good solid tank, this is it. If you want to have a completely overpowered tank, then sorry, no, but it has its trade-offs. And I think this is why I'm absolutely okay, because while it is more of the same, it is unique enough to make a bit of a difference. And at around this battle rating, the British already have enough, but for collectors, for British main players, that is definitely something to pick up. And that's it for me today, so thanks for watching, thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed this review. Please give it a like if it did, subscribe if you want to see more. Let me share your thoughts on this tank, how to fight against it, how to fight alongside with it, or how to fight with similar tanks. How has your experience been? And give this video a like if it did, subscribe if you want to see more, and we'll see each other on the waves, in the skies, and on the battlefields of War Thunder.